Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. It was a frosty, foggy November morning in Baltimore, Maryland. The sky was low, gray like a forgotten sheet of metal, and the air smelled of damp, rotting leaves and loneliness. The wind blew in irregular gusts, dragging crumpled newspapers and souvenirs that no one wanted to pick up. On a rusty old bench in Druid Hill Park, half eaten away by moss, James Holloway, 71, adjusted the closure of a threadbare canvas bag. He carefully arranged a folded army blanket inside with stubborn discipline, as if he were still in a base camp somewhere in the Middle East. His military jacket, too large for his body, thinned by the years, bore the marks of time. The elbows had been hand-sewn with beige thread, clumsy but strong. On his head, a cap, discolored by the sun and rain, displayed in faded letters. U.S. Army veteran, Gulf War. It was his only visible pride, a vestige of glory, planted on a man whom society had allowed to slowly fade away. James was tall, his shoulders still broad, but his back was now hunched, as if years of carrying burdens, visible and invisible, had finally made him permanently bent. His skin was lined, his hands calloused, and his gaze distant. His eyes, a deep brown, seemed constantly fixed on a point no one else saw. A point far, far away, perhaps still out there in the desert, where the dust and bombs fell with the same indifference as the rain on his tent. He spoke little. Every morning, even before the sun broke through the mist, he swept the dead leaves around his bench with an old broom he'd found in a dumpster. He lined up his belongings like a soldier inspecting his trench. Sometimes he picked up trash left by passers-by, not to please, but out of dignity. He greeted the joggers with a discreet nod. Some returned the nod out of politeness, others looked away. He wasn't offended. He had long understood that invisibility is the price you pay for growing old on the streets, especially when you're black, especially when you have nothing left to offer but silence. Many people didn't even know it existed anymore. To them, James was part of the scenery, a man sitting on a bench, a blur in the urban landscape, a shadow with a past no one bothered to question. But that morning, something changed. A few blocks away, in a luxury building in the upscale Mount Vernon neighborhood, an elegant white woman bursts out of the lobby. She is screaming, panting, hysterical. "Help! He stole my bag." She claimed that a tall, black man in a dark coat with a hood had just snatched her handbag and run off towards the park. The police arrived in less than 6 minutes. Sirens shattered the morning calm. 2 white officers, Officer Coleman, young, nervous, with a cold gaze, and Officer Richards, older, accustomed to acting without question, hurriedly got out of their vehicle. They searched the surroundings. And there, on his bench, alone, motionless, they saw James. He hadn't run away. He hadn't even raised his head. He continued folding an old plastic bag as if it were a classified military document. It vaguely matched the description. That was enough. Without warning, without summons, the 2 police officers walked towards him, weapons ready. One breathes. "Hands up." Now, James looked up slowly, as if waking from a dream. He understood immediately. It wasn't the first time he'd seen that look in the eyes of a man with a gun. Fear mixed with power and a dull hatred. He didn't resist. He didn't scream. He gently placed his things on the ground, hands visible. But they didn't give him time to explain. They brutally pinned him to the ground, knee on his back, arms twisted behind his weakened back. His bones creaked. He groaned. The floor was cold, wet, and smelled of mildew. His face was smashed against the dirty concrete, watched in shock by a teenager filming the scene with his phone. James whispered in a hushed voice, without anger, but with an abysmal fatigue. "I didn't do anything, gentlemen. I'm a veteran." But they did not listen to him. They didn't see James. They saw a supposed threat, a figure to be neutralized. A black man, alone, in a park. And as they led him away, handcuffed, injured, under the blue flashes of the emergency lights, the stolen bag was found, in an alley 2 blocks away, with another man's fingerprints. But it was already too late. For James, the arrest was not just an injustice. It was a final betrayal. Not the law, but the country he had risked his life for. He had known war. He had buried brothers. He had survived fire, loss, silence. But this humiliation, This gratuitous and public violence hurt him more than the bullets. He didn't cry. He fell silent, like a soldier unjustly captured in a territory he believed to be his. At the Baltimore Central booking station, between the crumbling walls and damp corridors, James Holloway was treated like just another case among dozens of others. None of the officers present bothered to check his full identity. No one consulted military databases. He was simply listed as an uncooperative black male, no fixed address, arrested near the scene of an alleged robbery. In the summary report, it was barely noted that he had said he was a veteran. A sentence scribbled in the margin, half erased, of no importance to those who thought they already knew the profile. A homeless person among many others, to be put in a cold cell until further notice. No lawyer, no formal interrogation, just administrative silence, heavy and contemptuous. The cell was small, windowless. The floor was cracked and oozed moisture. A fluorescent light buzzed on the ceiling, flickering occasionally as if to remind us that even the light here was reluctant to stay. For 3 days, James received no visits, no medical attention, and no explanation. His wrists still bore the deep marks of over-tightened handcuffs. His back, aching from the sudden fall onto the park's concrete, throbbed with every movement. He slept sitting up, leaning against the wall, on the hard floor, his coat as a blanket. Sometimes he closed his eyes, and then the gray walls of the police station faded away. He saw himself again in the Iraqi desert, under a starry sky, with his brothers in arms. He remembered the shouts, the orders over the radio, the crushing heat, the taste of sand mixed with fear. But most of all, he remembered them. Names etched in his memory. Faces he had never stopped loving. Private Jenkins, killed by an improvised explosive device. Lieutenant Alvarez, shot while covering his section. Corporal Deshaun Price, died in his arms. Every night in his cell, James spoke to them silently, like a survivor asking for forgiveness for still breathing. He didn't complain. He didn't even hold a grudge against anyone anymore. He waited, with a resignation that was anything but passive, but rather a soldier's patience. He knew that sometimes war didn't end after the fighting. A few miles away, in the modest offices of Baltimore Legal Aid, Kayla Thompson, 27, a young African-American lawyer, was mechanically sifting through a pile of files handed over by the police. A brilliant, recent Howard University intern with a passion for social justice, she dreamed of standing up for those no one else saw. She was still unknown, but her colleagues knew she had fire in her veins. Suddenly, she came across a name. Holloway, James W. Age, 71 years old. Status, pretrial detention. Charge, snatch and grab. Address, homeless. Comments, none. She squinted. Something sounded strangely familiar. She grabbed her phone and opened a veteran database. She entered the name hesitantly. A folder opened, almost yellowed by time. And then she shuddered. James W. Holloway, Silver Star recipient, United States Army, Operation Desert Storm. She reread the line at least 3 times. The Silver Star, the 3rd highest military honor in the United States. Awarded for extraordinary heroism in combat. James Holloway held his position under enemy fire for 36 hours, saving the lives of 12 soldiers in his unit at great personal risk. A hero, a decorated man, a forgotten man. Heart-pounding, Kayla grabbed her coat and rushed out of the office. She took a cab, her thoughts racing. How could a man honored by this country's army languish in a cell without anyone even checking who he was? When she arrived at the detention center, the guard raised an eyebrow at the sight of a young, frail, determined black woman so firmly demanding to see a detainee. Reason for the visit? I'm his lawyer. Kayla Thompson. Doesn't he have one? He has one now. She was taken to cell 4B. There she saw him for the first time. Sitting against the wall, his back straight despite the pain, his hands clasped in his lap. James Holloway seemed to have stepped out of another time. His face was hollow, his hair salt and pepper, his gaze unfathomable. He had the appearance of a fallen general, an exiled king, but his nobility remained intact. When he looked up at her, she felt a punch in her chest. He didn't need to speak. She saw everything in his eyes. Fatigue, honor, the hurt of being betrayed, but also, strangely, an absence of hatred, a silent acceptance of what the world had become. She whispered, moved. Mr. Holloway? He answered in a low but firm voice. Are you Mr. Thompson? She smiled despite her misty eyes. Yes. And you're a living legend, Mr. Holloway. We're going to get out of here. I promise you. He looked down. For the first time in a long time, a silent tear rolled down his rough cheek. And in this gray cell, at the heart of a system that wanted to bury him alive, justice had just found an ally. On the day of the hearing, the courtroom was packed. Onlookers, veterans in uniform, young racial justice activists, and even a few quiet journalists had gathered. They were all waiting to see what would become of James Holloway, the man accused of a crime he didn't commit. On the prosecution's side, the case was fragile, shaky, almost grotesque in its emptiness. No video, no footprint, just a vague description of an elderly black man seen in a park at the time of a robbery. No witnesses had come forward. The case was hanging by a thread, that of prejudice. Miss Kayla Thompson, dressed in sober black, rose slowly. She walked to the bar with a poise that imposed silence. Her voice, calm and firm, resonated with the force of a truth too long ignored. Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen, a man is being accused. Not a criminal, not a fugitive, not a public danger, but a soldier, a hero, a decorated former sergeant in the U.S. Army. He is accused without proof, without witness, without respect. What is being judged here is not James Holloway. What we judge is our system, our indifference, our biased view of black men, especially when they get older, especially when they fall into oblivion. Mr. Holloway wore the uniform. He shed his blood for this country. He buried fallen comrades. And today, what is he burying? His dignity? His memory? This trial is an insult. Another injury inflicted on those who, like him, received nothing in return but silence, the streets, and humiliation. A heavy silence fell. Even the embarrassed prosecutor avoided the judge's gaze. And that's when a hand went up in the audience. A young, nervous police officer cleared his throat. Your Honor, the real suspect was arrested this morning, based on surveillance video received late last night. He confessed. He has no connection to Mr. Holloway. He doesn't even look like him. A murmur rippled through the room. Mr. Thompson briefly closed his eyes, his fists trembling. James remained motionless, as if this victory were merely a fragment of justice that came too late. The judge, a man known for his strictness and undemonstrative manner, seemed upset. He slowly took off his glasses, wiped his reddened eyes, and spoke in a broken voice. Mr. Holloway, I beg your pardon. Pardon on behalf of this court. Apologies on behalf of a system that has abandoned you. I have never cried while delivering a verdict. Today, I do so because it is justice itself that owes you an apology. James simply nodded. His greatness that day wasn't in anger. It was in the silence worthy of a man who has lost everything yet never ceased to hope. But that was just the beginning. In the hours that followed, the video of the brutal arrest, taken from a shocked passerby, made the rounds on social media. It showed an elderly black man pinned to the ground, unresisting, humiliated, as he peacefully handed over his papers. But what struck the public more was the shocking report broadcast 3 days later on NBC by Marian Delgado, an award-winning journalist known for her investigations into social injustice. The 25-minute documentary was titled, The Man America Forgot, The Story of James Holloway. It featured photos of James as a child in the backstreets of Atlanta, archival footage of his joining the Army at just 17 years old, excerpts from military reports where his courage was praised, interviews with his former brothers in arms. He saved my life. Twice. He didn't talk much, but he was the best of us. Then, silence. Emptiness. Years of wandering. The slow descent into oblivion. A hero sleeping under cardboard boxes, ignored by all. At the end of the report, Kayla Thompson was seen, her eyes moist, saying, "This country does not lack heroes. It lacks memory." The reactions were immediate. Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube. The name James Holloway became a cry for conscience. This country treats its heroes like criminals. The real theft is that of one's dignity. Honor to James Holloway. A flag to cover his coffin, but not a roof for his old age. Shame. An online petition was launched. She asked 3 things. 1. A decent home for James Holloway. 2. A full retroactive pension for years of service. 3. A position of honor in ceremonies national military. In less than 2 weeks, more than 2 million signatures were collected. Donations poured in. Veterans came to shake his hand. Schools wanted him to come and tell his story. The Senate talked about him. So did the Pentagon. And James? He remained humble, upright, silent. When a reporter asked him how he felt, he simply replied, "I don't need statues. Just for us to listen next time." 2 months later, the sky over Washington, D.C. was a clear blue. The autumn wind gently flapped the star-spangled banner. The city, usually bustling with activity, held its breath on this day of remembrance, the annual Veterans Day Parade. On Pennsylvania Avenue, the ranks marched in step amidst military bands and bursts of applause. But this year, a suspended moment would mark history. In respectful silence, an old black man, in a perfectly fitted uniform, advanced slowly through the crowd. His sergeant's cap shone slightly in the midday light. On his chest, carefully aligned medals, silent testimonies of courage and sacrifice. It was James Holloway. The active soldiers stood at attention. The general saluted. Children held up homemade signs. "Thank you, James. A true hero. We will never forget you." But James wasn't smiling. He walked straight, dignified, with that solemn slowness that spoke volumes. This was not a moment of personal triumph. It was a procession of remembrance, a tribute to all those whom the nation had left in the shadows. In his eyes shone a deep light. It was neither pride nor revenge. It was the undiminished flame of a man standing firm despite everything. War, the street, prison, contempt. Everything had tried to extinguish it. Nothing had succeeded. Later that day, on the steps of the Capitol, a lectern was set up facing the crowd, the press, and officials. He was asked to say a few words. James slowly climbed the steps, accompanied by 2 Army cadets. When he reached the microphone, he paused for a moment, looked out at the vast audience, and then took a deep breath. His voice barely trembled, but his words carried like a calm cry to the heart of an awakened nation. "This country has forgotten me." Then he saw me. But I'm not the only one. Behind me are thousands of others. Former soldiers. Men and women you pass by without seeing. Tired faces, in stations, under bridges, in the streets. Some fought. Others simply survived. But all wear an invisible uniform, that of dignity. Don't wake up just for me. See them too. Listen to their silences. Welcome their stories. And above all, don't let them down again. A heavy silence fell over the square. Not a sound. Not a breath. Then, suddenly, the applause burst forth like a loud, deep, uncontrollable wave. Veterans in tears. Journalists lowering their cameras, upset. Members of Congress standing with clasped hands. James stood frozen for a moment. He looked up at the sky. He was probably thinking about his lost brothers in arms, the lost years, the ones he had never been able to save. Today, James lives in a simple house in Frederick, Maryland, at the end of a quiet street lined with maple trees. The home was given to him by a Veterans Foundation. It isn't large, but it has a front porch, a rocking chair, a library, and a small garden where he grows herbs. He reads a lot. Novels, poetry, history books. But above all, he intervenes in schools. He enters classrooms where children listen to him open-mouthed, silently, their gaze fixed on this man who speaks little, but who says everything. He doesn't tell stories to make you cry. He seeks neither pity nor glory. He tells stories to teach, to remind us that behind every uniform, every silence in the street, every lowered glance, there is a life, a fight, a dignity that only asks to be recognized. Bravery doesn't always wear medals, he once said. Sometimes it's just about holding on, day after day, when no one is looking.